You spent $50,000 on company funds for international travel. We've contacted corporate security. Clean out your desk by noon. The words fell like anvils in the morning meeting. Rain, our HR lead, announced this while standing at the front of our weekly gathering. My colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Some examined their shoes. Others pretended to check emails. The silence suffocated us all. I took a slow sip of my coffee and set the cup down. Check the card number again, Rain. We did. 3 times. Her voice dripped with condescension. I opened my wallet and removed my personal platinum credit card. This card. Check if the transactions match this card. I placed it on the wooden surface between us, not sliding it dramatically, just setting it down with quiet confidence. Rain picked it up, her eyes widening slightly as she examined it. This is your personal card? Yes. The same one I've been using for company expenses for 18 months now, because our corporate accounts have been empty. The conference room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Xavier, our CEO, appeared suddenly. There's been a misunderstanding. Let's discuss this privately, Marlo. My name is Marlo Ashton. Until that moment, I was the financial operations director at a medical technology startup developing affordable prosthetics. I believed in our mission with my entire heart. 4 years of my life poured into building something that mattered. Xavier guided me to his office, closing the door before turning to me. This is embarrassing. A clerical error. The accounting department saw the charges and assumed. They accused me of stealing in front of our entire team. I'll handle it. A public apology. Whatever you need. I stood perfectly still. What I need is an explanation of why my personal credit card has been the company's financial lifeline for over a year. Before he could answer, I left his office. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. Sometimes, the softest actions speak loudest. My involvement in the company's finances started innocently. My grandmother passed away 13 months earlier, leaving me her estate. The inheritance was substantial, enough that I'd never need to work again if I managed it wisely. Around that time, Xavier mentioned cash flow issues during a leadership meeting. A supplier needed payment before we could ship our newest prototype. The company account was waiting for an investor wire transfer. Just a timing issue, he said. I can cover it, I offered, just until the transfer clears. It was $32,000. I paid it from my personal account. Xavier seemed genuinely grateful, promising reimbursement within days. The wire came through a week later, and I was repaid. Then it happened again. Customs holding a shipment. Payroll system glitching between banks. Equipment lease coming due before a client payment cleared. Each time, I stepped in. Each time, the reimbursements came later and later. The travel expenses were different. Xavier needed to meet investors in Tokyo, London, and Singapore. A 2-week international trip. The company cards were maxed out. Could you book it on your card? The optics matter with these investors. First-class flights, luxury accommodations. We need to project success. I agreed. $50,000 charged to my platinum card. The trip happened. The meetings went well. I submitted my expense report when Xavier returned. Days passed, then weeks. When I inquired, I received vague assurances about accounting backlogs. The morning after the public accusation, I reviewed my records. The pattern emerged with painful clarity. What began as occasional help had morphed into regular financial support. Insurance premiums, office rent, supplier payments, data services. My personal funds had kept the company alive for months. $423,000 in unreimbursed expenses. Xavier called multiple times that day. I didn't answer. Instead, I met with my attorney, Bennett. Show me what you signed, he said, after hearing my story. I brought the paperwork. Vendor agreements, insurance policies, equipment leases. Bennett's expression darkened as he read. Marlo, you're listed as the financial guarantor on most of these contracts. What does that mean? It means you're personally responsible if the company defaults. My stomach tightened. That's not what Xavier told me. He said these were standard authorization forms. Bennett removed his glasses. These aren't authorizations. These are personal guarantees. Your signature here makes you liable for these obligations if the company can't pay. I sat in stunned silence, remembering all the times Xavier had approached me with paperwork, always when I was busy, always with reassurances that they were routine documents, always with a friendly smile. What do you want to do? Bennett asked. The answer came with surprising clarity. Nothing. Nothing. I'm going to stop paying. That night, I transferred all remaining funds from the accounts Xavier had access to. I canceled automatic payments. I removed my card information from all company systems. Then I waited. Before we continue further, thank you for listening to my story. I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to hear me out. Let me know in the comments where you're from. I'm always curious about where my words travel. 2 days later, it started. First, an urgent text from Xavier. Something's wrong with the payment system. Then another. The insurance company says our policy lapsed. Then, the building management is asking about rent. I didn't respond. By day 3, vendors were calling. Our web hosting provider suspended service. The payroll processor reported insufficient funds. Staff members texted me directly, confused about why systems were failing. I maintained my silence. Our company had appeared successful on paper because my personal funds had been patching every hole. Once I stepped away, the facade crumbled rapidly. On day 4, Xavier showed up at my apartment. I watched through the security camera as he paced outside, alternating between anger and desperation. I didn't open the door. I know you're in there, Marlo. You're destroying everything we built. I texted him one message. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped holding it together. That evening, Bennett called. The company's primary investor group reached out to me. Why would they contact you? Because during due diligence, they discovered your name on critical financial documents. They thought you were a major shareholder or co-founder. What did you tell them? The truth. That you were an employee who'd been personally financing company operations without proper documentation or authority. The following morning, Bennett forwarded an email from the investor group's legal counsel. They had pulled funding based on material misrepresentation of financial stability. The company had 24 hours to secure alternative financing or face immediate action. I knew no financing would come. When I arrived at the office the next day, security badges didn't work. A notice on the door informed employees that operations were temporarily suspended. People clustered in the parking lot, confused and angry. I didn't approach them. What could I say? That their paychecks had been clearing because of my personal bank account? That our celebrated CEO had been using my inheritance to create an illusion of success? Instead, I returned home and waited for the inevitable. The company declared bankruptcy 3 days later. Assets frozen. Employees terminated. Creditors circling. Xavier's final message came that night. You could have told me you were cutting us off. We could have prepared. Xavier's final message came that night. I stared at those words for a long time. The audacity stunned me. He had built a house of cards with my money, then blamed me when I stopped adding cards to the pile. My response was simple. You accused me of theft in front of our entire staff for paying the company's bills with my own money. He didn't reply. Bennett advised me to file claims as a creditor in the bankruptcy proceedings, but I hesitated. The money already spent felt like the price of an expensive education, a lesson in trust and verification. As the company dissolved, former colleagues began reaching out, not Xavier or Rain, but others, people who had witnessed my public humiliation. They had questions. Why had the company collapsed so suddenly? What had really happened? I didn't share the full story. Just enough for them to understand that appearances had been deceiving, that our successful startup had been running on borrowed time, and my personal funds. Some expressed gratitude. They hadn't known that their jobs had been preserved by my financial support. Others seemed angry, feeling betrayed by Xavier's deception. A month passed. The bankruptcy proceedings continued. I focused on rebuilding my life, interviewing with companies whose missions aligned with my values. I was careful to explain my departure from the previous role without bitterness or accusation. Then came the email from Bennett. Marlo, we need to meet. There's been a development. I met Bennett at his office the following morning. He had printed documents spread across his desk. The bankruptcy trustee found something interesting, he said, sliding a folder toward me. Financial records showing systematic transfers of company funds to personal accounts. I frowned. Not my accounts. No, Xavier's accounts. And Rain's. Bennett tapped the papers. Over 3 years, they diverted approximately $7 million from investor funding and revenue. My hands trembled slightly as I examined the records. Wire transfers, shell companies, consulting fees to entities that didn't exist. The evidence was meticulous and damning. The money I contributed wasn't keeping the company afloat. I whispered. It was replacing what they stole. Bennett nodded grimly. The bankruptcy trustee believes Xavier deliberately targeted you after your inheritance. Your financial support allowed them to continue siphoning funds without triggering cash flow alarms that would alert investors. The realization hit me with physical force. I hadn't been helping a struggling company. I'd been unknowingly facilitating fraud. There's more, Bennett continued. Those guarantee documents you signed? The trustee believes Xavier purposely misrepresented them to establish a financial safety net. If the scheme collapsed, creditors would come after you, not him. I sat back, processing this betrayal, the calculated nature of it, the careful grooming, the patient exploitation of my trust and goodwill. What happens now? I asked. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is investigating. They'd like to speak with you, as a witness, not a suspect. 2 FBI agents interviewed me the following day. I shared everything. The initial requests for help, the escalating financial support, the misrepresented documents, the public accusation of theft. They recorded my statement and collected my financial records. This appears to be a sophisticated fraud scheme, Agent Varma said. We've seen similar patterns where perpetrators identify wealthy employees and manipulate them into covering shortfalls. I felt foolish, used. I should have recognized what was happening. Agent Kerrigan shook her head. These individuals are skilled manipulators. They build trust over time. The fact that you were working on meaningful technology, prosthetics that help people, made you more vulnerable. You believed in the mission. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments from the past 4 years. The late-night strategy sessions with Xavier, the breakthroughs we celebrated, the patients whose lives improved with our devices. Had any of it been real, or was it all an elaborate performance to access my inheritance? The investigation progressed quickly. The FBI uncovered offshore accounts, luxury properties purchased through shell companies, evidence that Xavier and Rain had been planning their exit strategy for months before I stopped my financial support. Former employees were interviewed. Some had noticed red flags but stayed silent out of fear or loyalty. Others had been completely unaware, believing in the company's mission as deeply as I had. 2 weeks after my interview, Xavier and Rain were arrested. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, financial institution fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, identity theft. Local business news covered the arrests with dramatic headlines. Tech CEOs fall from grace, and prosthetics startup revealed as Ponzi scheme. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former colleagues, industry contacts, even old college friends who recognized my connection to the company. Did you know? Were you involved? Are you okay? I responded selectively, protecting my emotional energy. The public exposure felt like another violation, my private pain displayed for others' curiosity. Bennett called with surprising news 3 days after the arrests. The prosecutor wants to meet with you. The meeting took place in a sterile government office. District Attorney Elisa Montgomery explained that Xavier and Rain were seeking plea deals. They're offering full restitution to investors and creditors in exchange for reduced sentences, she said. I nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. There's a complication, she continued. The total they diverted is nearly $7 million. Their recoverable assets amount to just under $5 million. They're claiming they can't repay the remainder. Bennett leaned forward. What does this have to do with my client? Montgomery met my eyes directly. Mr. Ashton, they're asserting that your financial contributions were investments, not loans, that you were a silent partner who understood the risks. The audacity stole my breath. Even now, facing criminal charges, they were trying to use me. That's absurd, Bennett interjected. We have documentation proving these were temporary financial supports, with explicit promises of reimbursement. Montgomery nodded. I understand your position, but they've presented emails and texts that, taken out of context, could support their claim. They're desperate to avoid lengthy sentences. I sat with this information, feeling a strange calmness descend. They're still trying to make me pay for their crimes. Essentially, yes, Montgomery confirmed. If their claim stands, you would be classified as an investor who lost money, not a victim of fraud entitled to restitution. I thought about the months I'd spent rebuilding my life, the therapy sessions, working through betrayal and self-blame, the careful reconstruction of my professional reputation. What do you need from me? I asked. Detailed testimony. Every interaction, every promise, every misrepresentation. We need to establish a clear pattern of deliberate fraud, targeting you specifically. The preparation was exhausting. Hours with prosecutors reviewing communications, financial forensic experts analyzing transaction patterns, former employees providing corroborating statements about Xavier's manipulation tactics. Through it all, I maintained my composure. No angry outbursts, no public denouncements. I simply provided facts, dates, amounts. The truth needed no emotional embellishment. 3 days before the preliminary hearing, Bennett called again. Xavier's attorney reached out. They want to meet. The meeting occurred at Bennett's office. Xavier's attorney, an expensive-looking man named Palmer, presented their proposal. My client is prepared to acknowledge that Miss Ashton's financial contributions were loans, not investments. He will include the full amount in his restitution agreement, with priority payment status. Bennett remained expressionless. What does your client want in exchange? Miss Ashton's testimony focused strictly on financial matters. No character statements, no details about their personal interactions or conversations that might prejudice the court. I studied Palmer carefully. He's worried about his reputation. Palmer shifted uncomfortably. My client is concerned about fair treatment. Emotional testimony could unduly influence sentencing. I turned to Bennett. Could we have the room, please? When we were alone, Palmer leaned forward. Miss Ashton, my client recognizes the unfortunate way your professional relationship ended. You mean when he accused me of theft in front of my colleagues after I'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars keeping his company afloat? Palmer cleared his throat. That incident was regrettable. Xavier was under extreme pressure, as was I. Being publicly humiliated tends to be stressful. He's prepared to make amends, full financial restitution, plus a personal apology. I let the silence stretch before responding. Where is he getting the money for restitution? His assets are frozen. Palmer hesitated. His family is contributing. The piece clicked into place. Xavier's wealthy family, who had always kept distance from his business ventures, was now rescuing their son from the consequences of his actions. I see. So he betrays me, steals millions, tries to frame me for his financial crimes, and then gets bailed out by his family. Palmer began to respond, but I continued. Tell Xavier I'll consider limiting my testimony to financial matters. I need 24 hours to think about it. After Palmer left, Bennett returned. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Xavier is still manipulating circumstances to protect himself. That night, I reviewed everything again. The financial records, the text messages, the emails where Xavier praised my partnership and commitment to our vision. I remembered the morning of my public humiliation, the sick feeling as colleagues averted their eyes, Rain's satisfied expression as she delivered the accusation, Xavier appearing in the doorway, not to defend me, but to contain the situation. The next day, I called Bennett. Tell Palmer I've made my decision. I'll focus on financial matters in my testimony, as requested. Bennett seemed surprised. You're agreeing to their terms? Yes, with one condition. I want a meeting with Xavier before the hearing. Marlowe, that's not advisable. It's non-negotiable. The meeting was arranged for the following afternoon, in a small conference room at the courthouse. Security protocols required that Xavier be accompanied by a court officer who stood quietly by the door. Xavier looked diminished, his designer clothes replaced by a conservative suit that couldn't hide his lost weight, the confident posture now slightly hunched. Thank you for meeting with me, he said as I sat across from him. I studied his face, searching for the person I had trusted with my career, my finances, my belief. Why did you do it? He looked down at his hands. It started small. The company needed funds. I borrowed from investments, intending to replace it. Then we needed more. The cycle continued. That explains the fraud. It doesn't explain targeting me. Xavier met my eyes briefly before looking away. You were perfect, wealthy but not focused on money, committed to the mission, trusting. The clinical assessment of my exploitation made my skin crawl. And the theft accusation? Why humiliate me publicly? He shifted uncomfortably. We discovered you were reviewing financial records. Rain suggested we discredit you before you found discrepancies. Preemptive character assassination. I regret how things ended. I leaned forward. Things didn't end. Xavier, you deliberately destroyed something. You took a person who believed in you, in your vision, in your integrity. and you weaponized that belief. He remained silent. I've agreed to limit my testimony to financial matters, I said, standing to leave. But I want you to remember something. Every day of reduced sentence you receive because of my agreement is a gift you don't deserve. As I reached the door, he spoke again. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. I paused without turning back. Save your performance for the judge. I'm no longer your audience. The preliminary hearing proceeded the following week. As agreed, my testimony focused strictly on financial transactions, dates, amounts, documented promises of reimbursement, no emotional language, no character assessments. After I stepped down from the witness stand, Rain's eyes followed me with naked hostility. Xavier stared straight ahead, not making contact. Outside the courthouse, a reporter approached me. Miss Ashton, do you have any comment on today's proceedings? I maintained the same calm demeanor I'd shown in court. The financial records speak for themselves. Are you satisfied with how the case is progressing? I considered the question. Justice takes many forms. We'll see what emerges. That evening, Bennett called. Xavier and Rain both accepted plea deals. 5 years federal prison, full restitution to all victims. They're being sentenced next month. Thank you for letting me know. There's something else. The prosecutor mentioned that your testimony was unusually restrained. They expected more emotional content. I said what needed to be said. Bennett's words stayed with me long after our call ended. My restrained testimony had been deliberate, not out of mercy or weakness, but because I was playing a longer game. 3 days after the plea deals were announced, I received an unexpected email from Daisha Williams, a journalist from a prominent business publication. Miss Ashton, I'm researching the Xavier Rain fraud case. Several former employees mentioned your unique position in the company. Would you be willing to meet for background information only? I forwarded the email to Bennett, who advised caution. The case is still active until sentencing. Anything you say could complicate matters. I understand, I replied, but I'm curious what she knows. We arranged to meet Dacia at a quiet cafe across town. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with alert eyes and a recorder she placed on the table between us. Thank you for meeting me, she began. I've been investigating startup fraud patterns for a series I'm developing. Your case has unusual elements. Such as? I asked. Most financial frauds involve outsiders, investors, banks, customers. Yours involved a trusted employee who was deliberately manipulated. I sipped my tea. Is that what your sources told you? That's what the evidence suggests. I've reviewed the court filings. She paused. What interests me is why you didn't present the full scope of their actions in your testimony. Bennett tensed beside me. I focused on factual information, I said carefully. Dacia leaned forward. But you left out significant details. The public humiliation, the emotional manipulation, the deliberate targeting after your inheritance. Details that would have influenced sentencing. My goal wasn't maximum punishment. It was truth. Most fraud victims want justice. I met her gaze steadily. Who says I didn't get it? Her interest visibly heightened. Would you be willing to explain that off the record? Bennett started to object, but I raised my hand slightly. Let me ask you something first. In your research, have you connected Xavier and Rain to other companies? Dacia hesitated. Yes, 3 previous startups. All failed under unusual circumstances. And investors lost money in each one? Significant amounts, though none showed the same pattern of employee exploitation. Because they hadn't found the right target before, I said quietly. Dacia turned off her recorder. What aren't you telling me? I glanced at Bennett, who gave a slight nod. Xavier and Rain's plea deal requires full restitution to all victims, not just investors from our company, but previous ventures as well. Dacia frowned. Based on the seizure reports I've seen, they don't have enough assets to cover that. No, they don't, which is why Xavier's family is contributing. Understanding dawned in her eyes. They're paying to reduce his sentence. Yes, his parents are liquidating investments and property to make victims whole. Approximately $12 million. And you knew this would happen when you agreed to limit your testimony? I smiled slightly. Xavier comes from extreme wealth and privilege. His family foundation has his name on hospital wings. They'd never allow their son to serve a lengthy sentence if they could prevent it. So your restrained testimony was strategic. A longer sentence would have satisfied my anger, but accomplished nothing else. This way, every victim from every company gets repaid in full. Daisha sat back, reassessing me. You sacrificed personal satisfaction for broader restitution. I didn't see it as a sacrifice. 5 years is still significant time. And I had another condition in my agreement, which was Xavier and Rain forever barred from holding officer positions in any company. No financial industry employment, no startup involvement, permanent SEC restrictions. Bennett added, it wasn't publicized, but it's a binding component of their plea agreements. Daisha's expression showed professional admiration. You didn't just want them punished. You wanted them removed from the ecosystem. They exploited people's faith in innovation and human potential. They corrupted something meaningful. That doesn't deserve a second chance. After our meeting, Dacia requested permission to include portions of our conversation in her article. Bennett and I reviewed her draft carefully, before approving. The story published 2 weeks later, The Strategic Victim, How One Woman's Restraint Secured Justice for Dozens. It detailed how my tactical approach to testimony had facilitated broader restitution and permanent industry bans. The article circulated widely among business and technology circles. My inbox filled with messages from former colleagues, industry professionals, and surprisingly, victims from Xavier and Rain's previous ventures. Thank you for thinking of all of us. We never expected to recover anything. Your approach to justice is remarkable. Bennett called the morning the article published. The prosecutor's office is getting inquiries from other fraud victims about similar arrangements. You may have created a template. I felt a strange sense of peace. Not the fiery satisfaction of revenge, but something steadier, more lasting. Xavier and Rain's sentencing hearing arrived 1 month after the article. I attended, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, Xavier turned toward where I sat. I want to acknowledge the extensive harm I caused to someone who trusted me completely. Marlo Ashton wasn't just an employee or investor. She was a believer in what we claimed to be building. I exploited that belief systematically. While I can repay the financial losses, I cannot restore that kind of trust. It is my deepest regret. The judge's comments were pointed. The court notes that the comprehensive restitution arrangements in this case were facilitated by Miss Ashton's focused testimony. Her restraint allowed for a resolution benefiting numerous victims beyond herself. This demonstrates remarkable perspective and maturity. Outside the courthouse after the sentencing, several reporters approached me. Miss Ashton, are you satisfied with the outcome? Do you feel justice was served? What will you do next? I answered only the last question. I'm starting a new venture, a platform helping early-stage companies implement financial transparency systems. This wasn't a spontaneous announcement. For months, I'd been developing the concept with 2 former colleagues who had been equally devastated by Xavier's betrayal. We called it ClearLedger, a system allowing investors and employees to track company financial activities through protected verification channels without revealing sensitive details to competitors. The idea had come to me during sleepless nights after discovering Xavier's fraud. If such a system had existed, his scheme would have been impossible to maintain. No single person could have been manipulated as I had been. 3 months after the sentencing, ClearLedger secured initial funding. Our investor presentation included a case study based on my experience, anonymized but powerful. We emphasized how financial transparency protected not just investors, but idealistic employees who believed in company missions. The evening after closing our funding round, I received an unexpected email from Adira, our former lead engineer. Saw the news about ClearLedger. Brilliant concept. Would you consider having coffee? I have something you should see. We met at a small cafe near her new workplace. After brief catching up, she pulled out her tablet. When the company collapsed, I downloaded my work files. Standard practice to preserve portfolio examples. I found something you should have. She opened a folder containing design files for our prosthetic technology. Xavier didn't create these innovations. You did. In those late-night strategy sessions, the breakthroughs came from your suggestions. He just took credit. I scrolled through the files, recognizing concepts I had sketched on whiteboards, improvements I had suggested during development reviews. These designs work, Adira continued. The technology is sound. It could still help people. The patents belong to the company. They'll be liquidated in bankruptcy. Not all of them were filed. Some were still in development. Adira tapped the screen. These aren't patented yet. They're yours if you want them. I stared at the designs, feeling an unexpected surge of emotion. The work had been real. The mission had mattered. Xavier had stolen money and trust, but he couldn't take the purpose that had driven our efforts. 6 months later, Clearledger launched publicly. Our first clients included 3 medical technology startups. Within their development, roadmaps were innovative prosthetic designs licensed from a new entity, Ashton Innovations. The day we announced our client partnerships, I received a letter from Xavier's prison email system. I saw the Clearledger announcement and Ashton Innovations. You've built safeguards against people like me while still advancing the technology that matters. It's a victory I never anticipated. You didn't just recover. You transformed the landscape. I didn't respond. His observation didn't require acknowledgement. 1 year after Xavier and Rain began their sentences, Daisha contacted me for a follow-up story. We met at the same cafe as before. Clearledger has impressive traction, she noted. 32 client companies, industry recognition, investor interest exceeding capacity. We're meeting a need no one wanted to acknowledge existed, and Ashton Innovations prosthetic designs are entering clinical trials. I nodded. The first patients receive prototypes next month. You've created something remarkable from catastrophe, Dashi observed. Many would have retreated or become bitter. I considered those options, I admitted. They felt like allowing Xavier and Rain to determine my story's ending. Instead, you created structural change, systems preventing others from experiencing what you did. That's more satisfying than punishment. Is that why you supported their recent request for work release programs? Your endorsement surprised many people. I smiled slightly. They can sort recycling and pick up highway trash like any other inmate. Their permanent industry ban remains intact. But I didn't oppose them having a productive daily schedule. Dacia studied me. You've moved beyond revenge. Revenge would have kept me connected to them. I wanted freedom instead. As we concluded our interview, Daisha asked one final question. What would you tell someone facing a similar betrayal? I considered carefully before answering. Trust can be rebuilt, but it should include verification. Create systems, not just relationships. And remember that the most powerful response to deception isn't punishment. It's creating something better than what was destroyed. The resulting article generated new interest in Clearledger and Ashton Innovations. Inquiries from potential clients doubled. Investment offers arrived daily. But most meaningful were messages from individuals who had experienced workplace betrayal and found hope in my approach to recovery. My grandmother's inheritance had funded something valuable after all. Not Xavier's fraud, but the lessons that shaped what came after. The technology would help people walk again. The transparency platform would protect other idealists. The experience had cost me financially, but the return was immeasurable. If you found value in this story, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear that betrayal isn't the end of their story, just an unexpected turn in the plot. The most powerful chapters often come after the deepest wounds. Thank you for listening to my journey.